Two states, one border, and somehow two completely different realities. In January of 2025, one of these states had 274,000 job openings, more than double what it had a decade before. Right next door, around 124,000 vacancies during the same period. In 2024, one of these states generated over $760 billion in economic output. Its neighbor, around $320 billion. Two numbers, one massive economic gap. From space, they almost look identical. So why did one become a rocket ship while the other got left behind? The Carolinas have a lot in common. The same climate, a similar coastline. That's why they were once one colony. Even today, the two states are surprisingly similar. The median age, almost the same. Median income, in the same ballpark. The population's even grown at about the same rate since 1960. South Carolina should be ripe for growth. It's a massive, fertile lowcountry, a place full of islands and marshes, rivers, and deltas. It's perfect for growing crops like rice, indigo, and later on, cotton. And there was something even better to go with the lowcountry, a port. So, Charleston sprang to life, and that's why South Carolina is unusual. Areas with major ports tend to grow pretty quickly. South Carolina just had too many problems. So Charleston never became the center of a huge metro area. Small towns and big plantations sprang up instead to take advantage of the lowcountry's growing conditions. It was rural, not urban. North Carolina's geography didn't let it go all in on cotton, so it had no choice but to diversify its economy. Fortunately, the Tar Heel state had a secret weapon to do it, something South Carolina never did. North Carolina's Piedmont isn't just bigger. It's at the fall line. All that water falling in one place meant there was a lot of energy available. South Carolina used its own fall line to power mills. They sprang up all over the place. Sawmills, grist mills, textile mills, pretty much any kind of mill. North Carolina's geography forced it to diversify its trade and industry much earlier though. What does that add up to? Big towns. While South Carolina has only 3 cities with a population over 100,000, North Carolina has 10. North Carolina urbanized fast. South Carolina doubled down on plantations, but not necessarily because that's what either state wanted. It's just what the map demanded. If you've traveled along the eastern seaboard, you know I-95. But in North Carolina, it was 2 different highways, I-85 and I-40, and that did something much bigger. In North Carolina, the Piedmont and the Fall Line work together, like a self-reinforcing system. They help each other grow. That's why North Carolina is a curiosity among East Coast states. Most major cities hug the coast, but here, they're pushed inland. That became very important for the destiny of both of the Carolinas. For South Carolina, I-95 was a problem. It doesn't run through or near Charleston, so the port gets bypassed. But in North Carolina, I-85 and I-40 connected the inland cities. And they did something bigger. They rewired the economic geography of the Carolinas. When the federal government began building the interstate highway system in the 1950s, the goal wasn't economic development, it was defense. The idea was to move troops and equipment across the country as fast as possible if war broke out. But highways do something else. They decide who thrives and who doesn't. I-95 cuts straight down the eastern side of the state. Running across the middle is I-40, and I-85 cuts diagonally through the Piedmont before heading toward Atlanta. Those highways created something incredibly valuable, a transportation spine running directly through North Carolina. Suddenly, the state's cities weren't isolated manufacturing towns anymore. They were nodes in a network. Goods could move quickly between them. Workers could commute between them. Companies could build distribution centers. But this corridor didn't just move goods. It quietly changed where the best jobs would go and where the next generation of graduates would stay. In the 1950s, North Carolina made the single decision that would change everything for it: a research center. And the ingredients to make it a success were there. North Carolina had excellent universities that were producing the engineers, scientists, and researchers the growing economy needed. Duke, Chapel Hill, North Carolina State University. The Research Triangle Park opened for business, perfectly timed with the I-40 corridor's growth. Apple, Toyota, and others moved in, creating thousands of higher-wage jobs and giving graduates a reason to stay. Over time, this hub reinforced the Piedmont Triad, attracting even more companies and skilled workers. It set the stage for the next wave of economic growth. The idea of setting up a hub for industry near the ready labor source of North Carolina's universities paid off. South Carolina bet on factories, but North Carolina bet on ideas. Geography gave the Tar Heel state an edge, but projects like building the Research Triangle turned potential into momentum. South Carolina has never developed the same way. There's no continuous corridor running through the center of the state, no interior spine connecting universities, research hubs, manufacturing centers, and major airports. Instead, South Carolina's biggest economic assets are pretty spread apart. Charleston on the coast, Columbia inland, Greenville up near the mountains. Sure, they're connected, but they're not concentrated. North Carolina's highways, on the other hand, stitched its economy together into one long corridor of growth. By the time the interstate system was finished, North Carolina had something South Carolina didn't: a continuous economic corridor running through the state. That corridor would become the foundation for everything that came next. But before highways rewired the Carolinas, another industry had already shaped their economies. Textiles became the backbone of the Palmetto State's economy by the turn of the 20th century. But the collapse of those mills in the late 20th century still shapes the state today. Many former mill towns face lower incomes and slower job growth than the national average. North Carolina? Not so much. Help came from across the sea. BMW needed a plant in the US. Selling cars to the huge American market without shipping them across the Atlantic was a no-brainer. But they wanted a right-to-work state where they wouldn't have to bargain with a strong labor union. Much of South Carolina's future was riding on that plant. The result? The plant grew so much that it now makes over 400,000 vehicles a year. It's now BMW's largest factory in the world. But the biggest win was who else was paying attention. In 2009, Boeing made a huge decision. It went across the country to North Charleston. The state offered multiple incentives: lower labor costs, lower taxes, a good relationship with the US military, and crucially, a way to build planes in a non-union right-to-work state without the threat of labor strikes. South Carolina even offered to spend taxpayer money to help train the workers Boeing would hire. Columbia shelled out $60 million on special job programs between 2009 and 2022. And Boeing brought a boom with it. It has a legion of parts suppliers working with it. Those parts suppliers have come to South Carolina too. There are now over 400 aerospace and aviation companies in the state. If you're a supplier, you want to be close to where the action is. Just like in North Carolina, it saves on shipping. South Carolina succeeded in attracting factories, but factories don't create the next industry, they help assemble the last one. And that's what makes an economy more vulnerable. When one of those manufacturers runs into trouble, the shock doesn't stay inside the factory walls. Alarm bells started ringing almost as soon as Boeing's plant opened in North Charleston. The FAA discovered manufacturing and quality control flaws that eventually forced them to block all new Dreamliner deliveries. The production lines in South Carolina slowed down. Between 2000 and 2024, the Palmetto State lost 71,000 manufacturing jobs. North Carolina suffered too, losing over 300,000 manufacturing jobs during that same period before stabilizing. In fact, North Carolina lost about 7,200 manufacturing jobs in 2025. But unlike South Carolina, North Carolina had a diversified economy. Industries and urban corridors spread risk across the state, softening the blow of lost factories. It's another piece of the divide that keeps the Carolinas on a very different path. But in the early 2020s, something shifted. The pandemic reshaped how millions of Americans work. Geography suddenly mattered again. Employees could choose where they wanted to live. Across the country, educated workers began moving south. They wanted lower housing costs, warmer weather, growing cities. And when they looked at the Carolinas, that choice wasn't equal. Charlotte had become one of America's biggest banking centers. The Piedmont Corridor had universities and major corporate offices. South Carolina offered something very different: manufacturing jobs, tourism, logistics. Those are important industries, sure. They employ hundreds of thousands of people, but they don't attract the same kind of migration. Highly educated workers tend to cluster around innovation hubs, not assembly lines. Geography might have given North Carolina an edge with the fall line and cheap land, but the region only reached its full potential because of smart policy changes. In 1960, there were about 4.5 million people living in North Carolina. It hit around 11.2 million in July of 2025. The influx of jobs might have pushed rents and home prices higher than South Carolina. Surprisingly, they didn't. In late 2024, the median home price was $376,000 in the north and $381,000 in the south. Small differences on paper, but over time, they set the stage for a shift few could ignore. And hey, if this kind of deep dive is your thing, hit subscribe. There's more coming. For a young, college-educated worker, there's really no reason not to move to North Carolina. For much of the 20th century, graduates from North Carolina universities had little reason to stay. Technology, finance, research, the jobs simply weren't there at the time. Slowly, though, the region built something powerful: an ecosystem. And once an ecosystem forms, it begins to attract with its own gravity. Workers from other states started arriving. By the 2000s, North Carolina had something South Carolina didn't. Again, a dense concentration of high-skilled jobs clustered close together. Every engineer who moves to Raleigh increases the odds that a startup forms there. Every finance graduate who moves to Charlotte strengthens the city's banking sector. Every researcher who joins a lab in Durham adds to the region's intellectual capital. Opportunity attracts people, and people create more opportunities. That feedback loop can reshape entire regions. Today, the economic difference between the two Carolinas is visible, even from space. At night, satellite images show clusters of light stretching across North Carolina's interior. Charlotte to the Triad to the Triangle, a corridor of cities tied together by infrastructure, universities, and industries that feed off one another. South Carolina has bright spots too. Charleston glows along the coast, Greenville in the northwest. But between them, the lights thin out. That difference isn't just geography anymore, it's momentum. North Carolina invents, South Carolina builds. Innovation versus production defines the modern divide. And that is the Carolina Gap. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. Really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MapPack.